Rebecca Thompson had attended dozens of estate sales throughout Pennsylvania, but the Victorian mansion on Elm Street in Lancaster felt different from the moment she stepped through its oak doors. The house belonged to the late Dorothy Whitman, a 98-year-old woman who had lived as a recluse for the final decades of her life, rarely venturing beyond her overgrown garden. As a professional antique appraiser, Rebecca was drawn to the numerous family photographs scattered throughout the house. Most dated from the early to mid-20th century, displayed in ornate silver frames on mantels, side tables, and built-in bookshelves. The images told the story of an American family navigating the challenges of the Great Depression era. One photograph immediately captured her attention. Displayed prominently on the living room mantel, it showed a family of 4 gathered around a Christmas tree in what appeared to be the same room where Rebecca now stood. The black and white image was dated December 1932 in elegant script along the bottom edge. The scene radiated warmth and intimacy despite the economic hardships of the era. A father in a wool sweater sat in a leather armchair, his wife perched on the chair's arm, with her hand resting affectionately on his shoulder. Their teenage son knelt beside wrapped packages under a modestly decorated evergreen tree, while their young daughter, perhaps 8 years old, sat cross-legged on a patterned rug in the foreground. Everything about the photograph suggested a loving family sharing a precious holiday moment during difficult times. The carefully arranged presents, the mother's gentle smile, the son's excitement as he examined a wrapped gift, all conveyed the cozy domesticity that many families struggled to maintain during the Depression. But something about the little girl's expression made Rebecca pause and look more closely at the seemingly innocent family portrait. Rebecca lifted the silver frame from the mantel and carried it to the window where natural light would allow for better examination. The little girl sat in the center foreground of the photograph, wearing a white dress with puffed sleeves and a large bow in her dark hair. Her posture was perfectly appropriate for a formal family portrait of the era. However, her facial expression created a disturbing contrast to the warm family scene surrounding her. While her parents and brother displayed genuine happiness and seasonal joy, the little girl's smile appeared forced and unnaturally wide, stretching her small mouth in a way that seemed almost grotesque. More unsettling was the look in her eyes, which appeared completely disconnected from her artificial smile. Her gaze was directed toward the camera with an intensity that seemed far too mature and knowing for a child of her apparent age. There was something calculating and cold in her stare that made Rebecca feel deeply uncomfortable. The juxtaposition was jarring. A sweet family Christmas scene with a child whose expression suggested she was experiencing something entirely different from the joy and love evident in the rest of the photograph. Her smile appeared to be a mask, concealing thoughts or emotions that had no place in such an intimate family moment. Rebecca had appraised thousands of family photographs throughout her career, and she had developed an eye for the subtle details that revealed family dynamics and individual personalities. But she had never encountered a child whose expression seemed so deliberately deceptive and emotionally disconnected from her surroundings. The more she studied the little girl's face, the more convinced she became that this seemingly cozy family portrait concealed something dark and disturbing beneath its surface of holiday warmth and Depression-era resilience. Intrigued by the unsettling photograph, Rebecca decided to research its origins before making an appraisal offer to the estate executor. The house itself provided several clues. She had confirmed that the Christmas scene had indeed been photographed in the same living room, with the same furniture arrangement and architectural details visible in both the 1932 image and the current space. The estate documentation revealed that Dorothy Whitman had inherited the house from her parents, Thomas and Margaret Whitman, in 1945. Birth and marriage records from Lancaster County confirmed that Dorothy had been born in 1925, making her approximately 7 years old in the 1932 photograph. This matched the apparent age of the little girl with the disturbing smile. Rebecca's examination of other family photographs throughout the house revealed a troubling pattern. In images spanning from 1930 to 1940, Dorothy appeared with the same unnatural, forced smile and cold, calculating stare. While her parents and older brother Harold consistently displayed normal ranges of emotion appropriate to various occasions, Dorothy's expression remained eerily consistent across different ages and circumstances. The Lancaster Historical Society's archives contained records of the Whitman family, who had been prominent members of the community during the early 20th century. Thomas Whitman had owned a successful hardware store that managed to survive the worst years of the Great Depression, while Margaret had been active in church and charitable organizations. However, Rebecca found no mention of Dorothy in local newspaper social columns, school records, or community organization rosters from the 1930s. For the child of such a prominent family, this absence from public records was highly unusual. A breakthrough came when Rebecca discovered a collection of personal letters in the estate's papers. Among them was correspondence between Margaret Whitman and her sister Ruth, dating from the winter of 1932-1933, which provided disturbing insights into Dorothy's behavior during her childhood years. The letters between Margaret Whitman and her sister Ruth painted a troubling picture of family life behind the seemingly cozy Christmas photograph. Margaret's correspondence revealed growing concern about Dorothy's behavior and its impact on the family's daily life. In a letter dated January 1933, just weeks after the Christmas photograph was taken, Margaret wrote, "Dorothy continues to display the most unsettling behavior. During our Christmas celebration, she maintained that horrible artificial smile throughout the entire evening, even when she thought no one was looking. It's as if she's performing some kind of elaborate charade for reasons I cannot fathom." Ruth's reply, preserved in the same collection, showed that family members beyond the immediate household had noticed Dorothy's unusual demeanor. "I've always felt uncomfortable around Dorothy during our visits," Ruth had written. "There's something in her eyes that doesn't match her age. She watches everyone with an intensity that makes my skin crawl." More disturbing revelations emerged. In Margaret's letter from March 1933, Dorothy has begun making what she calls predictions about people in our community. "Last week she told me that Mrs. Henderson from church would fall down her stairs and hurt her leg. 3 days later it happened exactly as Dorothy described. When I asked her how she knew, she just gave me that terrible smile and said she sees things differently than other people." The correspondence revealed that Dorothy's unsettling behavior had escalated throughout 1933. She had allegedly predicted the closure of 2 local businesses, the death of an elderly neighbor, and various family crises with disturbing accuracy. Her predictions were always delivered with the same emotionless smile that was captured in the Christmas photograph. Margaret's final letter in the collection, dated November 1933, suggested the family was considering drastic measures. "Thomas and I have consulted with Dr. Morrison about Dorothy's condition. He believes she may require specialized care at an institution that can better address her unusual mental state. We can no longer pretend that our daughter is simply going through a difficult phase." Rebecca's investigation led her to contact Dr. Andrew Morrison's medical practice records, which had been donated to Lancaster General Hospital's historical archives. With proper authorization, she was able to examine Dorothy Whitman's medical file, which provided clinical documentation of her troubling behavior patterns. Dr. Morrison's initial evaluation from December 1933 described Dorothy as a highly intelligent child who displays emotional detachment inconsistent with normal psychological development. Patient demonstrates an unusual ability to predict future events with remarkable accuracy, claiming to possess knowledge of circumstances that have not yet occurred. The medical records revealed that Dorothy's predictions had become increasingly specific and disturbing throughout 1933. She had allegedly told her teacher that a classmate would break his arm during recess, warned her mother about a kitchen fire before it happened, and described in detail a train derailment that occurred exactly as she had foretold. School records from Lancaster Elementary showed that Dorothy had been removed from regular classes. In early 1934, due to what administrators termed disruptive behavior affecting the emotional well-being of other students. Teachers reported that Dorothy would make unsoliciting comments about future events involving her classmates, always delivered with her characteristic artificial smile. Miss Eleanor Hayes, Dorothy's 3rd grade teacher, had written, "Dorothy possesses exceptional intellectual abilities but demonstrates a complete lack of emotional connection to her predictions. When her forecasts prove accurate, she shows no surprise or satisfaction, only that same cold smile that disturbs both staff and students." The medical file also contained Dr. Morrison's recommendation that Dorothy be evaluated by specialists at the Pennsylvania State Hospital for mental health issues. However, the records showed that her parents had initially resisted this recommendation, hoping that her behavior would improve with age. A notation from 1935 indicated that Dorothy's predictive abilities had gradually diminished as she entered adolescence, though her emotionally detached demeanor and artificial smile had persisted throughout her teenage years, ultimately defining her personality for the remainder of her long, reclusive life. Rebecca's research led her to contact Mrs. Helen Crawford, a 91-year-old woman who had lived next door to the Whitmans during the 1930s and was one of the few people still alive who remembered Dorothy's childhood. Mrs. Crawford agreed to meet at her nursing home, bringing with her decades of memories about the unsettling young girl who had lived next door. "Dorothy was the strangest child I've ever encountered," Mrs. Crawford began, her voice still strong despite her advanced age. "She would stand at her bedroom window for hours, just watching our house with that awful smile on her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was like she knew secrets about us that we didn't know ourselves." Mrs. Crawford described several incidents that had left lasting impressions on her. "In the spring of 1934, Dorothy came to our backyard fence and told me that our apple tree would fall during a storm and damage our roof. She was very specific about which part of the roof would be damaged and how much it would cost to repair. When I asked her how she could possibly know such things, she just smiled that horrible smile and walked away. The prediction had proven accurate 3 weeks later during a severe thunderstorm. The tree fell exactly as she had described, damaging the exact section of roof she had indicated. The repair costs were within dollars of her estimate. My husband and I were so disturbed that we considered moving away from the neighborhood." More unsettling was Mrs. Crawford's account of Dorothy's behavior during community gatherings. At church socials and neighborhood events, Dorothy would approach people and whisper things to them, predictions about illnesses, accidents, or family problems. People began avoiding the Whitmans because nobody wanted to hear what Dorothy might say about their future. Mrs. Crawford revealed that Dorothy's predictions had created a climate of fear in their small community. Parents started keeping their children away from her because she would tell them disturbing things about what would happen to them or their families. The accuracy of her predictions made everything worse. People were terrified that she might be cursing them rather than simply foreseeing their futures. Through hospital records and correspondence with state archives, Rebecca discovered that Dorothy had been quietly committed to the Pennsylvania State Hospital in 1936 at age 11. The commitment papers, signed by both parents and Dr. Morrison, cited severe emotional detachment combined with unusual perceptual abilities that create distress for patient and community. The institutional records painted a complex picture of Dorothy's years in care. Staff psychologist Dr. James Patterson had conducted extensive evaluations, noting that Dorothy's predictive abilities remained active during her early years at the hospital. She continued to make accurate forecasts about staff changes, patient transfers, and institutional policies with the same emotionless delivery that had characterized her childhood behavior. Patient maintains her characteristic artificial smile and demonstrates no emotional connection to her predictions, Dr. Patterson had written in 1937. When questioned about her knowledge of future events, she consistently states that she sees things as they will be rather than as they are. Her predictions continue to prove accurate with disturbing frequency. The medical staff had attempted various treatments available in the 1930s, including occupational therapy, art therapy, and primitive forms of counseling. However, Dorothy's fundamental personality remained unchanged throughout her institutional stay. She was described as cooperative but emotionally distant, maintaining her artificial smile and cold demeanor regardless of circumstances. A significant change occurred around 1940, when Dorothy's predictive abilities began to fade. Staff noted that her forecasts became less frequent and less accurate, though her artificial smile and emotional detachment persisted. By 1942, the predictions had ceased entirely, leading to her evaluation for possible release. Dorothy was discharged back to her family's care in 1943, at age 18, with the stipulation that she continue regular psychological evaluations. The records indicated that she had spent 7 years in institutional care, missing most of her childhood and adolescence while being treated for abilities that medical science couldn't understand or effectively address. Dorothy's return to Lancaster in 1943 marked the beginning of her transformation into the reclusive elderly woman whose estate Rebecca was now appraising. Medical follow-up records showed that her predictive abilities never returned, but the emotional detachment and artificial smile that had characterized her childhood remained permanent features of her personality. Employment records revealed that Dorothy had worked briefly as a file clerk at her father's hardware store, but was let go after customers complained about her unsettling demeanor. Several local business owners reported similar experiences. Dorothy's qualifications were adequate, but her artificial smile and cold stare made both colleagues and customers uncomfortable. By 1945, when she inherited the family home following her parents' deaths, Dorothy had effectively withdrawn from normal social interaction. Neighbors reported seeing her only during brief trips to purchase necessities, always displaying the same artificial smile that had disturbed people throughout her childhood. Mail records and utility bills showed that Dorothy had lived an increasingly isolated existence for the following decades. She had maintained the house and grounds adequately but had avoided virtually all social contact with the community. The few people who encountered her during her adult years described the same unsettling combination of artificial friendliness and emotional emptiness that had characterized her childhood. Rebecca discovered that Dorothy had never married, had no close friends, and had outlived all her immediate family members by decades. Her will, dated 1998, left her entire estate to various charities, with specific instructions that her personal belongings be sold at public auction rather than donated, suggesting she wanted no lasting connections even after death. The Christmas photograph that had first caught Rebecca's attention appeared to be the last documented image of Dorothy displaying genuine family connections. Every subsequent photograph in the house showed her alone, always with the same artificial smile that suggested she was performing happiness rather than experiencing it. As Rebecca pieced together Dorothy Whitman's tragic life story, she began to understand the disturbing nature of her expression in the 1932 Christmas photograph. Dorothy hadn't been a normal child experiencing family warmth. She had been a young girl whose unusual perceptual abilities had already begun to isolate her from normal emotional connections with other people. The artificial smile captured in the Christmas photograph wasn't the expression of a happy child sharing holiday joy with her family. Instead, it was the carefully constructed mask of a little girl who had already learned that her ability to see future events made other people uncomfortable, and who was attempting to appear normal despite her fundamental difference from those around her. Rebecca realized that Dorothy's smile appeared wrong because it was wrong. It was the performance of happiness by someone who experienced the world in ways that prevented authentic emotional connection. Her cold stare wasn't malicious or calculating. It was the gaze of a child who saw events before they happened and had learned that sharing this knowledge only frightened and disturbed the people she loved. The cozy family Christmas scene took on a tragic new meaning when viewed through this understanding. While her parents and brother genuinely experienced the warmth and joy of their holiday celebration, Dorothy was already seeing the future consequences of her abilities, the fear they would create, the isolation they would bring, and the institutional care that would define her childhood. The photograph had captured a pivotal moment when Dorothy was still trying to participate in normal family life despite her extraordinary and unwanted abilities. Her artificial smile represented her desperate attempt to fit in with her family's happiness, even though her different perception of reality was already beginning to separate her from the people she loved. What had initially appeared to be a disturbing child's expression was actually a heartbreaking attempt by a young girl to hide her difference and protect her family from the knowledge of what she could see. Rebecca carefully returned the Christmas photograph to its silver frame. But Dorothy Whitman's story had profoundly changed her understanding of the tragic young girl whose artificial smile had first caught her attention. She decided to research ways to honor Dorothy's memory and ensure that her story would be understood with compassion rather than fear. Working with Lancaster County Historical Society, Rebecca arranged for a small memorial exhibition featuring Dorothy's story alongside historical context about the treatment of unusual psychological conditions during the 1930s and 1940s. The exhibition emphasized how society's inability to understand Dorothy's experiences had led to unnecessary isolation and institutional care during crucial developmental years. The Christmas photograph became the centerpiece of the display, accompanied by explanatory text that helped visitors understand why Dorothy's smile appeared so disturbing. Rather than presenting her as a frightening anomaly, the exhibition portrayed her as a vulnerable child whose extraordinary abilities had been misunderstood by a society lacking adequate knowledge about unusual perceptual phenomena. Rebecca contacted Dr. Patricia Williams, a modern psychiatrist who specialized in unusual psychological conditions, to provide contemporary perspective on Dorothy's experiences. Dr. Williams suggested that Dorothy might have experienced a rare form of temporal perception disorder that created vivid, accurate visions of future events while simultaneously impair her ability to form normal emotional connections. The memorial exhibition drew attention from researchers studying unusual psychological phenomena, leading to Dorothy's case being included in academic studies about historical instances of unexplained predictive abilities. Her story contributed to greater understanding of how society's response to unusual conditions can exacerbate rather than alleviate individual suffering. The Lancaster community learned about Dorothy's tragic isolation during her adult years, leading several residents to express regret that fear and misunderstanding had prevented them from offering friendship to someone who had spent decades alone in their neighborhood. Dorothy Whitman's story serves as a reminder that behind disturbing expressions and unusual behavior often lies profound loneliness and the human desire to belong, despite fundamental differences that set individuals apart from others.